Daniel Kane opened his eyes to darkness. Cold air filled his lungs, and his body shook as the cryopod released him from 800 years of frozen sleep. Red warning lights flashed above him, and alarms screamed through the empty corridors of the colony ship Vanguard. Something was very wrong. He pushed against the glass lid of his pod, and it hissed open slowly. His muscles burned with every movement. 8 centuries of sleep had made his body weak, and he fell to the metal floor like a newborn trying to walk. The cold bit into his skin, and he lay there for a long moment, breathing hard and trying to remember who he was. Daniel Kane, combat engineer, Earth Federation Marines. He had volunteered for the colony mission after the last war, when Earth was dying and humanity needed a new home. 12,000 colonists had boarded the Vanguard, all of them placed in cryo-sleep for the long journey to the Kepler system. They were supposed to wake up to a new world, a fresh start, a second chance for the human race. Instead, Daniel woke up alone in a ship that was falling apart. He forced himself to stand, holding onto the pod for support. The cryo chamber was massive, filled with rows upon rows of sleeping pods that stretched into the darkness. The emergency lights gave everything a blood-red glow. Most of the pods still showed green status lights, which meant the colonists inside were alive. But the power was failing, and Daniel could hear the ship groaning around him like a wounded animal. A terminal flickered to life nearby, and Daniel stumbled toward it. The ship's artificial intelligence was supposed to manage everything during the journey, but the display showed only fragments of data, broken images, and corrupted text. He worked the controls with numb fingers, trying to piece together what had happened. The AI spoke in a voice that crackled with static. Emergency revival protocol activated. Threat detected. Hull breach on decks 4 through 7. Primary power offline. Backup power at 18%. Life support failing in 71 hours. Daniel stared at the screen. What threat? What happened to us? The AI showed him security footage, but most of it was corrupted. He saw flashes of something moving through the corridors, tall figures with dark armor and too many limbs. Then the footage cut to static. Unidentified vessels intercepted the Vanguard 14 hours ago, the AI said. Boarding parties have entered the ship. They are currently on decks 3 through 6. Their purpose is unknown. Their species is unknown. They have not attempted communication. Daniel felt his heart beating faster. Aliens. After all the centuries of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, they had finally found the answer, and the answer had come to kill them. He looked around the cryo chamber. 12,000 people slept in their pods, helpless and unaware. The aliens were moving through the ship, and in 71 hours, the life support would fail. Everyone would die. Unless someone stopped it. Daniel was not a hero. He was just a soldier who had survived too many wars. He had joined the colony mission because he was tired of fighting, tired of watching people die, tired of being the one who walked away when others did not. He had wanted peace. He had wanted to sleep forever and wake up in a better world. But the universe had other plans. He found a maintenance locker near the back of the chamber. Inside were basic tools, a few emergency rations, and a cutting torch used for repairs. No weapons. The Vanguard was a colony ship, not a warship. The colonists were farmers, scientists, teachers, and builders. They had left their weapons behind on Earth, along with their wars. Daniel picked up the cutting torch and tested its flame. It was meant for cutting metal, not fighting. But in the hands of someone who knew how to use it, anything could become a weapon. He moved to the chamber door and listened. The corridors beyond were silent. But he could feel vibrations through the floor. Something was moving on the decks below, something heavy and deliberate. The aliens were searching the ship, probably looking for the colonists, probably studying them like specimens in a laboratory. They did not know that one of the specimens had woken up. Daniel opened the door slowly and stepped into the corridor. The emergency lights cast long shadows across the walls, and the air smelled like smoke and something else, something chemical and strange. He followed the vibrations, moving quietly through the damaged sections of the ship, avoiding the areas where the hull had been breached. He found the first alien on Deck 5. It was tall, almost 8 feet, with a body covered in dark chitinous plates that looked like armor. It had 4 arms and 2 legs, and its head was narrow and elongated with eyes that reflected the red emergency lights like mirrors. It carried a device in one of its hands, something that looked like a scanner, and it was examining a damaged section of the wall with obvious curiosity. It did not carry a weapon. Daniel watched it for a long moment, studying how it moved, how it reacted to sounds, how it held itself. The creature was confident, almost casual. It moved like something that had never been threatened, never been hunted, never been afraid. That was its first mistake. Daniel came up behind it fast and silent. The cutting torch flared to life, and before the alien could turn around, he drove the flame into the gap between its armor plates. The creature screamed in a frequency that hurt his ears, and it swung its arms wildly, trying to grab him. But Daniel was already moving, using the alien's own body as a shield while he found another gap, another weakness. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. The alien fell to the floor, its body twitching and smoking. Daniel stood over it, breathing hard, the cutting torch still burning in his hand. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph. He felt only the cold certainty that this was just the beginning. He knelt beside the body and examined the device the alien had been carrying. The controls were unfamiliar, but the symbols on the screen seemed to indicate locations throughout the ship. A map. The aliens were tracking each other, coordinating their search. Daniel smiled grimly. Now he could track them too. He took the device and moved deeper into the ship. The aliens had made a terrible mistake when they boarded the Vanguard. They had expected to find 12,000 sleeping humans, helpless and easy to study. They had not expected to find Daniel Kane. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, more aliens waited. They did not know that death was coming for them, one corridor at a time. They would learn soon enough. Humanity had slept for 800 years. Now it was awake, and it was angry. The Vorath had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had conquered 900 worlds and studied countless species, cataloging the universe like collectors filling a museum. They were scientists, explorers, and masters of technology so advanced that lesser species could not even understand it. They had forgotten what it meant to be afraid. Commander Zeth stood on the bridge of her cruiser and watched the data streams from the boarding parties. The human vessel was primitive but fascinating. A slow ship that had traveled through space for centuries, using nothing but frozen sleep and basic propulsion. The creatures inside were equally primitive, soft-bodied beings with limited senses and fragile biology, perfect specimens for study. "Commander," one of her officers said, "we have lost contact with Patrol 7. Zeth turned her narrow head toward the display. Patrol 7 had been searching Deck 5 of the human ship. Their life signs had simply vanished from the sensors, all 4 of them, in less than a minute. "Equipment failure," she said. "Send Patrol 8 to investigate." She returned her attention to the data streams. The humans were an interesting species, despite their limitations. They had traveled far from their dying world, carrying thousands of their kind in frozen sleep, hoping to find a new home among the stars. It was almost admirable, in a primitive way. The Vorath would study them carefully before deciding their fate. "Commander, Patrol 8 has gone silent." Zeth felt a flicker of annoyance. She brought up the security feeds from the human ship, but most of them showed only static or darkness. The primitive vessel's systems were failing, which was expected, but the pattern of the failures seemed wrong somehow. "Send a hunter unit," she ordered. "Full combat protocol." The hunter units were the elite soldiers of the Vorath Dominion, bred and trained for war. They had not been needed in centuries, not since the last species foolish enough to resist had been wiped from existence. But Szeth believed in being careful. Whatever was happening on the human ship, the hunters would end it quickly. Daniel moved through the corridors like a ghost. He had killed 12 Vorath in the past 6 hours, using nothing but the cutting torch, a length of metal pipe, and his knowledge of how to fight in close quarters. The aliens were easy targets. They moved in predictable patterns, communicated on frequencies he could detect with their own equipment, and they had no idea how to handle an enemy who attacked from the shadows. They were not soldiers. They were scientists and explorers, creatures who had grown soft from thousands of years of dominance. They had never faced a predator like him. He stripped each body of useful equipment, learning their technology through trial and error. Their scanning devices were simple once he understood the symbols. Their communication systems were elegant but unencrypted. He could listen to their transmissions, track their positions, and stay one step ahead of their search parties. The ship's AI fed him updates when it could. The life support was failing faster than expected. 53 hours remained. The colonists in the cryopods would start dying soon after that, their frozen bodies slowly warming until they suffocated in their sleep. Daniel could not let that happen. He found a junction room on Deck 4 and used it as a base. The Vorath avoided certain areas of the ship, the sections where the hull damage was worst and the radiation levels were highest. Daniel's body could handle radiation that would kill the aliens in hours. Another advantage. He was setting a trap when he heard them coming. These were different. Their footsteps were heavier, more deliberate, and they moved in a tactical formation that showed actual training. He watched them through a damaged camera feed. 4 tall figures in armor that was thicker and darker than the others. They carried weapons that looked like rifles, and their movements were sharp and professional. Hunters. Daniel felt a cold smile spread across his face. Finally, a real challenge. He let them find the body he had left in the corridor. While they examined it, he moved through the maintenance tunnels above them, positioning himself behind their formation. The hunters were careful, covering their angles and watching for threats, but they made one critical mistake. They looked ahead, not up. Daniel dropped from the ceiling onto the rear hunter, driving his improvised blade through the gap in its neck armor. The creature fell without a sound, and Daniel was already moving, using the body as cover while he charged the next target. The hunters reacted fast, faster than the others, but not fast enough. He killed the second hunter with a strike to its knee joint that dropped it to the floor, then finished it with a blow to the head. The third hunter fired its weapon, and the energy bolt scorched the wall where Daniel had been standing a second earlier. He rolled under the shot and came up inside the creature's guard, too close for it to aim. The cutting torch burned through its chest armor. The last hunter was smarter. It retreated down the corridor, firing as it moved, trying to create distance. Daniel let it run. He knew these corridors better than the aliens did, and he had already planned for this. The hunter reached a junction and turned left, heading toward what its scanner showed as an exit. Instead, it found a dead end, where Daniel had welded the doors shut hours earlier. The creature turned, raising its weapon, and found Daniel already there, standing in the shadows with the alien rifle he had taken from the first hunter. "You should have stayed on your ship," Daniel said. The hunter died before it could respond. Daniel collected the weapons and equipment from the bodies. The alien rifles were powerful, but simple, energy-based weapons with limited ammunition. He took all 4 of them, and as much ammunition as he could carry. The hunters also carried medical supplies, which he used to treat the burns and cuts he had collected during the fight. He was getting better at this. The aliens were learning to fear him. Back on the Vorath cruiser, Commander Szeth stared at the sensor display in disbelief. The hunter unit was gone, all 4 of them, killed in less than 5 minutes. The security footage showed only fragments, glimpses of a shadow moving too fast to track, but it was enough. A single human was doing this. One primitive creature from a dying world had killed her soldiers with tools and stolen weapons. It was impossible. It was unthinkable, and yet the bodies kept piling up. "Commander," an officer said nervously, "what are your orders?" Zeth was silent for a long moment. She had conquered worlds. She had crushed species that were far more advanced than these humans. She would not be defeated by one creature. "Send everyone," she said. "Full assault. I want that ship taken and that human dead within the hour." She did not know it yet, but she had just made the worst mistake of her long career. Daniel was waiting for them. The Vorath assault force numbered 120 soldiers, more than enough to take a small city. They entered the human ship through multiple breach points, moving in coordinated waves designed to overwhelm any resistance. Their commanders had studied the security footage and prepared countermeasures. They would find the human, surround it, and destroy it with superior numbers and firepower. That was the plan. Daniel had a different plan. He had spent the hours before the assault preparing the battlefield. The Vanguard was a colony ship, not a warship, but it was filled with systems that could be turned into weapons by someone who knew how to use them. Fuel lines could be ruptured to create fire traps. Airlocks could be sealed to cut off retreat. Power conduits could be overloaded to create explosions in exactly the right places. The first wave of Vorath soldiers walked into a corridor on Deck 6 and found themselves trapped when the doors sealed behind them. Before they could react, the atmosphere vented into space, pulling them through a hull breach that Daniel had created specifically for this purpose. 30 soldiers died in seconds, their bodies tumbling into the void. The second wave was more careful. They moved slowly, checking every corner, scanning for traps. Daniel let them advance deep into the ship before he triggered the fuel line he had prepared. The explosion tore through 2 corridors and collapsed a section of the ceiling, crushing another 20 soldiers under tons of metal. The surviving Vorath began to panic. Their communications filled with screams and warnings, reports of traps and ambushes coming from every direction. Their commanders tried to maintain order, but the soldiers were frightened, firing at shadows and retreating from sounds that might or might not be the human. Daniel moved among them like a ghost. He struck from above, from below, from behind. He killed soldiers who wandered too far from their units and left their bodies where others would find them. He used the alien communication devices to send false orders, leading squads into dead ends and killing zones. He was everywhere and nowhere, a demon that could not be caught or killed. By the end of the first hour, 67 Vorath soldiers were dead. The rest had retreated to a defensive position near the main breach point, refusing to advance further into the ship. Their commanders screamed orders at them, but the soldiers would not move. They had seen what the human could do. Commander Zeth watched the disaster unfold from her bridge, and for the first time in her long life, she felt something close to fear. This was not possible. One creature, one primitive human, was defeating an entire assault force. Her soldiers were the best in the Dominion, equipped with the finest weapons and armor that Vorath science could produce. And they were losing to a single enemy who fought with stolen equipment and improvised traps. "Pull them back," she ordered. "All units, retreat to the cruiser." Her officers stared at her in shock. A Vorath commander did not retreat. A Vorath commander conquered or died. It was the way of the Dominion. "Now," Zeth said, and her voice left no room for argument. The surviving soldiers fled the human ship as fast as they could move. Daniel let them go. He had achieved his objective. The Vorath would not try another direct assault, not after losing so many soldiers to a single enemy. They would have to find another way. He knew what they would choose. The Vorath cruiser powered up its main weapons, the massive energy cannons that could crack a planet's crust. Commander Zeth stood at her command station and gave the order to fire. If she could not take the human ship, she would destroy it. The colonists inside, the human creature that had killed her soldiers, all of it would be reduced to atoms. The weapons locked onto the Vanguard, and nothing happened. Zeth stared at her displays in confusion. The weapons showed ready. The targeting systems showed locked. But when she gave the order to fire, the cannons did not respond. "What is happening?" she demanded. Her officers checked their stations, their movements becoming frantic. Something was wrong with the ship's systems, something deep in the computer core that was blocking the weapon commands. Impossible. The Vorath computer systems were the most advanced in the galaxy. No one could hack into them, certainly not a primitive human. A message appeared on Zeth's command screen. The text was rough, clearly translated by a simple algorithm, but the meaning was clear enough. "You took something that belongs to humanity. I'm coming to take it back." Zeth felt her blood go cold. The human had not just been killing her soldiers. While they died in the corridors of the colony ship, the creature had been doing something else, something far more dangerous. It had been studying their technology, learning their systems, finding their weaknesses, and now it was using that knowledge against them. The Vanguard's engines roared to life, impossibly, because the ship's power core had been nearly dead hours ago. But Daniel had found a way. He had patched together power from a dozen different sources, borrowed energy from the cryopods and life support systems, and redirected it all to the engines. The colony ship began to move, its damaged hull groaning under the strain. It was not heading away from the Vorath fleet. It was heading toward them. Zeth shouted orders at her crew. "Get the weapons back online, full power to shields. All ships, intercept that vessel." But her fleet was in chaos. The other captains had seen what happened to the assault force. They had heard the reports of the human demon that could not be killed. Some of them were already pulling back, unwilling to face whatever was coming for them. Daniel stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, surrounded by damaged displays and failing systems. He had maybe 30 minutes before the ship fell apart completely. The weapons were limited to a few point defense turrets. The shields were gone. The hull was held together by emergency patches and hope. But he had something the Vorath did not. He had nothing left to lose. The Vanguard accelerated toward the enemy fleet, and humanity came for its children. Lisa Grant woke up screaming. The cryopod released her into chaos, red lights and alarms and the sound of explosions somewhere in the distance. Her body felt wrong, weak and cold. And her memories were scrambled fragments of a life that seemed very far away. A man's face appeared above her, hard and scarred, with eyes that had seen too much death. "Can you fight?" he asked. Lisa blinked, trying to focus. "What? Who are you? What's happening?" "My name is Daniel Kane. We've been boarded by aliens. The ship is dying. I need people who can hold a weapon. Can you fight?" She remembered then. She had been a pilot in the Earth Federation Navy, before the colony mission, before the long sleep. She had survived 3 wars and crashed twice. She had thought those days were behind her. "Yes," she said, "I can fight." Daniel pulled her out of the pod and handed her an alien rifle. It was strange in her hands, the grip too wide and the trigger in the wrong place, but she could feel the power humming inside it. "Follow me," Daniel said. "There are others waking up. We don't have much time." Lisa followed him through the damaged corridors of the Vanguard, stepping over debris and bodies that she tried not to look at too closely. Some of the bodies were human, colonists who had died when the hull was breached. Most of them were alien. Tall creatures with dark armor and too many limbs. Daniel had killed them all, alone, with nothing but his hands and his rage. She found herself looking at him differently after that. They gathered 11 more colonists from the cryo chambers, all of them former soldiers or pilots or engineers who had fought in the old wars. Daniel had chosen them carefully, pulling their files from the ship's damaged computer and waking only those who could be useful. It felt cold, almost cruel, but Lisa understood. They did not have time for kindness. Daniel explained the situation in quick, hard sentences. The Vorath had captured the Vanguard and killed hundreds of colonists. Their fleet surrounded the ship, and their weapons could destroy it at any moment. The only way to save the remaining colonists was to capture a Vorath vessel with working life support and enough power to sustain the cryopods. "We're going to attack them?" one of the colonists asked. His name was Kevin, and he had been an infantry sergeant on Earth. 13 of us against an alien fleet?" 12, Daniel said. "I'm staying behind to pilot the Vanguard. You'll board the command cruiser while I keep the rest of the fleet busy." Kevin stared at him. "That's suicide." "Maybe, but it's also our only chance." There was no argument after that. They all knew the stakes. They all knew what would happen if they failed. The Vanguard closed with the Vorath fleet, and the battle began. Commander Zeth finally got her weapons back online, but it was too late for a clean kill. The human ship was already among her fleet, weaving between the cruisers with a skill that seemed impossible for such a damaged vessel. The human pilot was using her own ships as shields, forcing her captains to hold their fire or risk hitting each other. And while she dealt with the colony ship, the boarding pods launched. Lisa felt her stomach drop as the tiny craft shot toward the Vorath command cruiser. The pod had been designed for emergency evacuations, not assault, and it handled like a brick with engines. Beside her, the other colonists gripped their weapons and said nothing. They all knew that most of them would die in the next hour. The pod slammed into the cruiser's hull, and the colonists cut their way inside. The fighting was brutal. The Vorath had been caught off guard, but they recovered quickly, flooding the corridors with soldiers and sealing bulkheads to trap the invaders. The humans had no choice but to fight through them, room by room, corridor by corridor. Lisa killed her first Vorath at point-blank range when it came around a corner and crashed into her. The alien was huge, towering over her, but she was faster, and she put 3 energy bolts through its chest before it could grab her. The second one she killed from behind, shooting it in the back while Kevin held its attention. The third one almost got her, its clawed hand raking across her shoulder before she managed to finish it. She lost track of how many she killed after that. The colonists pushed deeper into the cruiser, taking heavy losses but refusing to stop. They had no room for retreat, no option for surrender. Every one of them knew that Daniel was out there alone, flying a dying ship against an entire fleet, buying them time with his blood. They would not waste that sacrifice. Kevin went down on deck 7, hit by an energy bolt that burned through his armor and into his chest. He was still alive when Lisa reached him, but barely, his breath coming in wet gasps. "Keep going," he said. "Don't stop for me." Lisa wanted to argue, wanted to stay and help, but there was no time. She squeezed his hand once and left him behind, leading the remaining colonists toward the bridge. Outside, Daniel was dying. The Vanguard had taken dozens of hits, and half the ship was on fire. The engines were failing, the weapons were gone, and the hull was cracking apart. Daniel flew by instinct alone, pushing the ship through maneuvers that should have torn it apart, drawing fire away from the cruiser where his people were fighting. He took another hit, and the bridge exploded around him. Metal fragments tore through his arm and leg, and the pain was so intense that his vision went white. But he did not stop. He could not stop. The colonists needed more time. He aimed the Vanguard at the nearest escort ship and accelerated. The impact shattered both vessels. Lisa felt the explosion through the cruiser's hull, a deep vibration that shook the walls and knocked her off her feet. She did not know what had happened, but she knew it was Daniel. She knew he had given everything. She screamed and charged the bridge. The Vorath commander was waiting for her, surrounded by guards, but Lisa did not care. She killed them all, firing until her weapon overheated and then using it as a club. When she finally stood over Commander Zeth, blood dripping from her wounds, she felt nothing but cold rage. "This ship belongs to humanity now," she said. Zeth looked up at her with something that might have been respect. "You are like him? The other one?" "Yes," Lisa said, "and there are more of us. Many more." She pulled the trigger, and the commander fell. The battle was over. Humanity had won. They found Daniel in the wreckage 3 hours after the battle ended. Lisa led the search team personally, refusing to believe that he was dead until she saw the body. The Vanguard had been destroyed in the collision with the escort ship, broken into 1,000 pieces that drifted through space like the bones of a dead giant. The escape pod had launched at the last second, barely clearing the explosion, and it had tumbled through the debris field until it crashed into an asteroid. Daniel was inside, barely alive. His body was broken in a dozen places. Burns covered most of his skin. His right arm was gone below the elbow, torn away by shrapnel. The medical scanner showed internal bleeding, collapsed lungs, and damage to his spine that should have killed him hours ago, but he was still breathing. "Get him to the cruiser," Lisa ordered. "Now!" They carried him back to the captured Vorath ship, where the alien medical technology worked desperately to save his life. The machines did not understand human biology, and the colonists had to guide them through every procedure, translating between species and hoping they did not make a fatal mistake. It took 16 hours. When Daniel finally opened his eyes, Lisa was sitting beside him, her arm in a sling and her face covered with healing cuts. She looked exhausted, but she smiled when she saw him awake. "You missed the party," she said. "We took the ship." Daniel tried to speak, but his throat was raw from the smoke he had breathed. Lisa gave him water and helped him sit up, and he looked around the medical bay with eyes that slowly focused. "The colonists," he managed. "The cryopods. Safe. We transferred them to the cruiser before the Vanguard fell apart. 9,000 people, still alive. You saved them." Daniel closed his eyes. 9,000. They had started with 12,000. 3,000 people had died because of the Vorath, because of this senseless attack on a ship that meant no harm to anyone. "The rest of the fleet?" he asked. Lisa's smile faded. "They ran. After we took the command ship and you destroyed the escort, the other captains decided they didn't want to fight anymore. They're still out there somewhere, but they're not coming back." "They'll come back eventually. The Vorath don't give up that easily." "Then we'll be ready for them." Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the steel in her eyes. She was not the same woman who had woken up screaming in the cryopod. The battle had changed her, hardened her, turned her into something dangerous. He recognized it because he had seen the same thing happen to himself years ago, during the First War. "How many did we lose?" he asked. Lisa's jaw tightened. 7 of the 12 who boarded with me, and you almost made 8. Daniel nodded slowly. 7 dead out of 12. It was a high price, but they had paid it willingly, knowing what was at stake. He would remember their names. He would make sure they were never forgotten. Over the next few weeks, the surviving colonists worked to repair the captured cruiser and prepare for the journey ahead. The Vorath ship was far more advanced than the Vanguard had been. With engines that could cross the galaxy in months instead of centuries, they renamed it the Hope because that was what it represented now. Daniel recovered slowly. The alien medical technology was advanced, but it had limits, and some of his injuries would never fully heal. His right arm was replaced with a mechanical prosthetic that the Vorath used for their own wounded soldiers. It was strong and precise, but it was not his. He spent a lot of time alone, staring out the viewport at the stars. Lisa found him there one night, sitting in the darkness of the observation deck. She had become the unofficial leader of the colonists while he was healing, organizing the work crews and making the difficult decisions that kept everyone alive. She was good at it, better than he would have been. You're brooding again, she said, sitting down beside him. I'm thinking. Same thing with you. Daniel almost smiled. I'm thinking about what comes next. Earth is gone. The Kepler colony might still exist, or it might have been destroyed centuries ago. We don't know what's out there. So we find out. It's not that simple. The Vorath will come after us. They don't like losing, and we humiliated them. There could be other species too, other threats we can't even imagine. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I used to be scared of space. When I was a little girl, I would look up at the stars and feel small, insignificant, like nothing I did could ever matter in a universe that big. And now? Now I've killed aliens with my bare hands and helped capture a starship. I don't feel small anymore. Daniel turned to look at her. She was staring out at the stars, her face lit by their distant light, and he saw no fear in her eyes. He saw only determination. Humanity survived ice ages, she said. We survived plagues and wars and the death of our own planet. We crossed the void between stars to find a new home, and when something tried to stop us, we killed it. Nothing in this galaxy can break us, because we don't know how to break. Daniel thought about that. He thought about all the humans sleeping in the cryopods, dreaming of a new world. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, and they were still here, still alive, still fighting. Maybe that was enough. What do we tell them? He asked. When they wake up and find out that everything has changed? Lisa smiled. We tell them the truth. We tell them that humanity has enemies now, but we also have a ship, and weapons and people who know how to fight. We tell them that the road ahead is dangerous, but we've already proven that we can survive. And we tell them that as long as one human is still breathing, we will never give up. Daniel nodded slowly. It was not a perfect answer. Nothing ever was. But it was honest, and it was true, and that was all that mattered. He stood up and looked out at the stars one last time. Somewhere out there, the Vorath were planning their revenge. Somewhere out there, other species were waiting to be discovered. Somewhere out there, the answers to all of humanity's questions were hiding among the galaxies. It was time to find them. Set a course for Kepler, Daniel said. Let's go see what's left of our colony. The Hope turned toward the distant star and began to move. Behind it, the wreckage of the Vanguard drifted slowly into the void, a monument to everything humanity had lost and everything it had gained. Ahead, the galaxy waited. And humanity was coming.